My name is Ethan, and if you asked me how my life was going, I wouldn't know where to begin. The simplest way to say it, this isn't where I thought I'd end up. 35 years old, a single father, and back in the one place I promised myself I'd never return to. It's not that I hate this town, it's just filled with memories, and not all of them are good. Now, my daughter Lily and I are making do in the small cottage my grandfather left behind. It's seen better days, paint peeling, floors creaking under every step, but at least it's a roof over our heads. It's just the two of us now, and she's the only thing in my life that still feels right. Lily is 6, an endless ball of energy that never seems to run out. She has a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hops, a ragged thing with one ear barely hanging on, but she refuses to go anywhere without it. She whispers secrets into its plush ears like it's her closest friend. Kids have this way of finding happiness in the smallest things, don't they? I wish I could do the same. I wasn't always like this, quiet, tired, weighed down. In high school, people thought I had my life figured out. I got good grades, played baseball, and even dated Mia, the girl everyone admired. Back then, the world felt like this vast, open road, just waiting for me to take it all in. But that was a long time ago. Mia's gone now. Cancer took her 2 years ago, and I've been doing my best to keep going ever since. Then, 6 months ago, I lost my job. I was just a mechanic, nothing fancy, but it was steady work and I was good at it. Then came the layoffs, and I was one of the first to go. That's when things really fell apart. My savings disappeared faster than I'd expected, and the bills kept piling up. I tried to keep things normal for Lily, but kids pick up on more than we realize. She knew something was wrong, even if she never said it out loud. Moving back home wasn't what I wanted. My relationship with my parents has always been complicated. They're not bad people, but somehow they always make me feel like I haven't quite measured up. My dad believes a man should stand on his own, no matter what. My mom, on the other hand, is loving but overbearing, treating me like I'm still a kid instead of a grown man with a daughter of his own. This version that keeps the same tone and meaning, but with a smoother flow. I never drink around Lily. That was a promise I made to myself. I wouldn't let her see me like that. But after she's asleep, I'll pour myself a drink or two. Just enough to take the edge off, you know. It's not something I'm proud of, but it helps. Or at least that's what I tell myself. The bottles stay hidden in the back of an old cabinet, tucked behind a pile of dusty books. Out of sight, out of mind. The first few weeks back in town weren't easy. The house smelled like it had been sealed shut for years, even though my parents swore they kept it clean. Every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the old place. Sleeping in my childhood bedroom again felt strange, like stepping into a life I thought I'd left behind. But Lily didn't seem to mind. To her, this was just another adventure. The thing about small towns is that no one ever forgets you. A trip to the grocery store turns into a reunion with half the town, and they all ask the same questions. How have you been, Ethan? What brings you back? I give them the short version. Just needed a fresh start. It's easier than admitting the truth, that I feel lost, that I have no idea what comes next, that right now I'm just trying to survive. But for Lily, I keep going. She deserves more than just getting by. And maybe, just maybe, this town will be the second chance I never saw coming. This version keeps the heart of your writing but enhances the flow and emotional depth. Find version of your passage that maintains the same tone while enhancing the flow and emotional depth. The polite smiles, the nods, the same rehearsed answers. I gave them all without hesitation. I'm doing fine, just needed a fresh start. No one pushed too hard, but I could see the pity in their eyes. I wasn't looking for sympathy, I just needed to keep moving forward. The house needed work, and that was enough to keep my hands busy. The roof was barely holding together, the kitchen sink leaked, and the front door had sagged in the middle, hanging on by sheer willpower. My Uncle Henry stopped by a few times, offering advice I never asked for. I swallowed my pride, nodded along, and focused on the work. Arguing wouldn't fix the door any faster. Life wasn't easy, but every morning I reminded myself why I was here, why I had uprooted everything and started over. For Jamie, for his future. He deserved better than what I'd been able to give him so far. I wasn't sure what this town had left to offer, but I hoped it was something worth staying for. For now, hope had to be enough. Opportunities were scarce. I drove around town, stopping anywhere with a help wanted sign in the window. Grocery stores, hardware shops, even the tiny cafe where I used to take Lily on our Sunday breakfast dates. It didn't matter. I just needed something steady, something to keep the lights on and food on the table. But everywhere, the answer was the same. It's just slow right now. Try again in a month or two. A month or two was a lifetime when bills were piling up. So I took whatever I could find. A neighbor needed his gutters cleaned. A guy across town had a lawnmower that wouldn't start. Someone else needed help moving furniture into storage. The work was sporadic, the pay barely enough, but it was something. Every morning, I checked the community bulletin board at the coffee shop, asked around, hoping for a few hours of labor. Some days I got lucky. Other days I came home empty-handed, wondering how much longer I could keep this up. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was leaving Jamie alone. I hated the thought of him being by himself, but I didn't have much choice. My parents lived a few blocks over, and my mom insisted on coming by to watch him. At least, that's what she called it. Most days, she'd settle into the recliner, turn on her favorite soap operas, and doze off halfway through an episode. "Don't you worry, Lucas," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "I'll take good care of him." And in her own way, she did. Jamie didn't seem to mind. He built towers out of wooden blocks, filled his colouring books with bright scribbles, and occasionally peeked into the living room to check if Grandma was still awake. He adapted quickly, and for a little while, things felt steady. The house even started to feel like home again. I patched the leaks, fixed the squeaky floorboards, and tightened the hinges on the stubborn cabinet doors. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then, one morning, I noticed it, a small dark patch of mould on the kitchen wall. It wasn't much, no bigger than my hand, creeping up from the baseboard. Probably a leak behind the drywall. I made a mental note to check it later, but with work lined up that day, I didn't have time to deal with it immediately. By the time I got home that evening, the patch had grown. I frowned, crouching for a closer look. The air smelled damp, tinged with a musty odour that curled into the corners of the room. I ran my fingers along the wall, soft, too soft. The damage ran deeper than I'd thought. I sighed. Just another thing to fix. But as I stood there, studying the dark stain creeping outward, a strange unease settled in my gut. It had spread too fast. Something wasn't right. I told myself it was just water damage, an inconvenience. Nothing more. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. The first time I noticed the stain, I thought it was just a trick of the light. A dark smudge in the far corner of the living room wall, barely visible unless you looked closely. But when I ran my fingers over it, the texture was wrong. It wasn't damp like a water stain, nor was it sticky like old paint residue. It felt off, as if the darkness had seeped into the wall itself. I grabbed a sponge and cleaner, scrubbing at it with all the force I could muster. Nothing. The stain didn't fade. It didn't even smear. Frustrated, I told myself I'd deal with it over the weekend when I had more time. Then another patch appeared in the hallway. This one was even stranger. It wasn't near any plumbing, so moisture couldn't be the cause. I tried to ignore it, but the house had always been well kept, and this sort of thing had never been an issue before. Finally, I mentioned it to my uncle, who had helped me move in. "Probably just the weather," he said with a shrug. "These old houses hold on to moisture, but you might want to check the roof. Could be a leak." I sighed. The roof was the last thing I wanted to deal with, but I nodded, promising to check when I had time. The patches kept spreading, slowly, steadily, creeping into the corners of rooms, behind furniture, even onto the ceiling in the bathroom. And then the strange things started happening. My nephew Oliver began acting differently. He was still his usual curious self, but he started talking about someone he called the Whisperer. "The Whisperer says we shouldn't touch the dark spots," he told me one afternoon while lining up his toy soldiers on the rug. I looked up from the book I had been pretending to read. "The Whisperer?" The word sent a chill down my spine. I kept my tone light. "The Whisperer?" I echoed. "Who's that?" Oliver didn't look up. He just adjusted one of his soldiers and said, matter-of-factly, "He lives in the walls." This a refined version to heighten the suspense and deepen the unease. Oliver shrugged. "My friend, He lives in the walls. I forced a chuckle, though something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Kids and their imaginary friends. Oh yeah? What does he look like? He doesn't come out. He just talks to me when I'm playing. I ruffled his hair, ignoring the way my fingers trembled slightly. Well, tell him to be nice, okay? Okay, Uncle Ryan, Oliver said with a grin. And just like that, the conversation was over. For a while, I pushed the weirdness to the back of my mind. I had just started a new job at a local bookstore. Not much, but after months of scraping by, it felt good to have something steady. The downside was that I wasn't home as much. Most nights, I came back to find Oliver already in bed, my sister asleep on the couch, the television murmuring softly in the background. Then one night, Oliver greeted me at the door, eyes bright with excitement. The Whisperer told me there's a secret door under the stairs, he announced. I smiled tiredly, setting down my keys. A secret door, huh? Did you find it? Oliver shook his head. No, but he says it's there. He told me about it when Mom fell asleep. He knows lots of things. I played along. Oh yeah? Like what? He knows about the kids who used to live here. Oliver's voice dropped to a near whisper. There were 3 of them. A boy named Charlie, a girl named Rosie, and another boy. But I'm not supposed to say his name. My fingers stiffened around the grocery bag I was holding. Charlie and Rosie. The names meant nothing to me, but something about the way Oliver spoke sent a chill up my spine. I kept my voice light. Charlie and Rosie, huh? Did Mom tell you about them? No, Oliver said. The Whisperer did. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Oliver continued, oblivious to my unease. Charlie had a red wagon and Rosie liked to draw flowers, but she didn't like pink. She liked purple. It was such a tiny, specific detail, too specific. That night, after Oliver was asleep, I found myself standing at the staircase. My pulse drummed in my ears as I crouched down, pressing my knuckles against the wooden panels. Solid. I moved lower, knocking again. Hollow. My breath hitched. Grabbing a flashlight, I ran my fingers along the edges of the panel. It took several minutes of prying before it gave way with a sharp, splintering creak. Behind it, a small crawl space extended into darkness, and something inside smelled wrong. Bánh xe của chiếc xe kéo đã gỉ sét, một xấp tranh vẽ nhàu nát, phần lớn là những bông hoa, và một con búp bê cũ rách nát với khuôn mặt lấm lem thứ gì đó tối màu. Tôi giật lùi lại, tim đập thình thịch. Lời của Oliver vang vọng trong đầu tôi. Cháu không được nói tên của cậu ấy. Tôi cố trấn an bản thân. Có lẽ những người chủ cũ đã để lại những món đồ này. Có lẽ Oliver vô tình nghe ai đó kể về lịch sử của ngôi nhà. Nhưng khi tôi đứng đó, nhìn vào khoảng không đen ngòm trong hốc tường, tôi nghe thấy nó. Một tiếng thì thầm, nhẹ, mơ hồ, nhưng không thể nhầm lẫn, và nó phát ra từ bên trong những bức tường. Sáng hôm sau, tôi lập tức thu xếp để rời đi. Tôi không nói với Oliver về những gì mình đã tìm thấy. Tôi không muốn làm thằng bé sợ. Nhưng khi chúng tôi đang đóng gói đồ đạc, nó bỗng dừng lại, nhìn tôi với vẻ mặt nghiêm túc. Người thì thầm nói chúng ta không nên rời đi. Thằng bé lặng lẽ nói. Tôi cố mỉm cười. Nhưng chú nghĩ là chúng ta nên đi. Oliver ngập ngừng. Rồi, sau một cái nhìn cuối cùng về phía những bức tường, nó khẽ gật đầu. Khi xe lăn bánh, tôi không dám nhìn vào gương chiếu hậu. Tôi không muốn thấy căn nhà. Và tôi càng không muốn biết liệu có thứ gì đang dõi theo chúng tôi rời đi hay không. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what Olivia had said. It was just a child's imagination running wild. At least that's what I told myself. But her words lingered, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. That evening, as I tucked her into bed again, I decided to press a little further. Hey, Liv, I said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. Tell me more about the Shadow Man. What else does he say? She peeked at me from beneath her blankets. He says this was his house first, a long, long time ago. I swallowed. And the bones? She hesitated, then whispered, they belong to the others, the ones who didn't listen. A shiver crept up my spine. I wanted to laugh it off, tell her she was just making up stories, but something about her tone, calm, certain, kept my breath caught in my throat. That night, long after Olivia had drifted off to sleep, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at the wooden floorboards. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. It was an old house. Old houses made noise. A faint sound drifted up from beneath the floor, a whisper. So soft, so distant, I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it at all.